All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining. I'm excited to host lesson 2 of the Introduction to Sailing, for which we'll be going through a few topics today: sailing physics and wind, driving, steering, tacking, and jibing. It's spelled two ways. One is the US, the other is the UK. Jibing is Jibing in the US, Gybing in the UK. We're going to go over man overboard procedures. We don't want any man overboards, but we'll practice with something this weekend. And then the last thing we'll go over for this evening is anchoring, mooring, and docking. I've asked that all the participants please save the questions to the end, as I'm trying to keep the recording under 1 hour. And then we can go through as long as you want and talk after. So sailing physics, there's a lot of physics at force with the boat. The first is the driving force. As we know, sailboats derive their power from the wind flowing across the curved surfaces of the sails. This is similar to the way like an airplane wing produces lift to keep the plane up in the air. We've all been on an airplane at some point, and we don't really question it. But when it comes to sailing, it's a little bit different. A sail is like an airplane when it works best when one angle to the wind. So we call that the angle of attack. So that's why we're able to sail the boat almost 360 degrees without going right into the wind, because you need a slight angle in order to create that lift. Remember the no-go zone or the in irons that we discussed last week. This is slightly different because you're able to sail everywhere except that area. Yeah, in figure 1, which is the one at the top here, when the sail hit the upwind face of the sail, it experiences a reduction in speed. Due to the increase in pressure on the opposite side, a further depression is formed, and it's the same, it gives almost like a suction effect. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like wind coming around a building or something like that, and it gives basically like a whirlwind effect at the back. So basically, that is what this figure is showing, the driving force of the sail. And it's creating these tiny little whirlpools, and it's not creating it once or twice, it's creating it consistently while you sail. When this wind bands reach the upwind face, they will slow down and compare the general wind circulation. Due to this, air particles are deflected by the shape of the sail and thus lose their speed by rubbing its surface. I would normally ask if there are any questions, but I'm just going to move on. We can ask questions about driving force towards the end. Sideways force. Not all the force produced by the sails pushes the boat forward, except the boat is now on a run with the wind directly behind it. So that just means that when you're sailing downwind, you're just catching breeze on one side of the sail and it's pushing you forward. But the driving force is what we call the pulling effect. At the other times, the total force produced by the sail has a sideways element that attempts to push the boat sideways, and strength of the sideways force depends on the point of sail that the boat is going on. So like we discussed last week, the sideways force will be very high when you're trying to sail upwind, because the wind is pushing on the front of the sail and it's angling the boat down. You counteract that with both the way you're steering, the trim of the sails, as well as the weight of your crew that is all going to be positioned on the opposing side from the sail. The strength of the sideways force depends on the point of sail. The sideways force is at its greatest when the boat is close hauled and diminishes as the boat bears away. So bearing away just means coming off from the breeze. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. On all points of sail, if a sail is pulled in too far so that it stalls, the driving force drops rapidly and the sideways force increases. The boat slows down and heels more. What this basically means is that a flat boat is a fast boat. If you can keep your boat as flat as possible, you're going to be maximizing your speed with the maximum surface area of your sails pointed up into the breeze. So if your boat is being pushed over on one side, you will be losing a percentage of your power. Basically, it's blowing up over the sails. The last thing I want to talk about for this slide is heeling forces. Because the sideways force is generated by the sails, acts some distance above the waterline, it has the effect of trying to heel the boat. Because your sails are so tall, the power of the wind at the top of the sail is really pushing the boat down. But we counteract that both with the keel, which weighs, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pounds. It's pure lead under the boat in the center, as well as the weight of the crew. So that is the healing forces that go to work. As we can see in picture 2 and 3, it's the same basic principle. The wind is coming from the side, you have the sideways force up above, and then you have the resistance to the sideways force down below, which would be A, the crew, B, the keel, and then you can trim to allow changes in your speed and direction. For this next section, we want to talk about the wind. The wind is very integral in sailing. In the pictures in front of you here, the boat wind they're actually talking about is created by an engine, but we'll also have boat wind when we start sailing, which derives what's called the apparent wind. True wind, which is, you know, notated by TW here in this picture. The true wind is the direction that the wind is coming from. And we can tell the true wind by looking at all sorts of things on the water, from ripples on the waves, any flags that are flying either on land or on nearby boats. At the top of all the sailboats that will be sailing this weekend, there's a weather vane that points to the direction of the wind. This I would call pointing to the direction of the apparent wind, though, because it's a combination of the true wind and the boat wind. As the boat moves forward, it creates the effect of wind on your face. So in picture 1, on the far left of your screen, under the true wind sign, you can actually see the true wind is coming from the starboard side of the bow, and the boat wind is the direction that you're sailing. So that makes the apparent wind equidistant between the two of those. When you're on a beam reach, which you can see in the second picture, the boat is coming directly across the beam of the boat, and it is creating the effect that the wind is actually coming off the bow, even though the wind is actually coming from the side. Because you're moving forward while the wind comes from the side, you're getting an effect from the front side of the boat. On picture 3 right here, we have a broad reach, meaning you're going not downwind directly, but you have the wind catching towards the broad quarter of the boat. You have it coming from behind the beam. Everything aft of the beam, so this is the beam here, the middle of the boat, everything aft of that is considered broad. So once you've left your beam reach, which is when the wind is coming from the side, it is now coming from behind. You have a broad reach, and the broad reach is creating a wind effect that the true wind is coming from behind, and the apparent wind is coming not quite from behind, but almost from the side. In the last picture here, this is the most obvious. Your winds are counteracting each other because your boat is moving forward, which creates breeze on your face, and the wind is coming from directly behind you, which basically stalls the effects of the breeze. Unfortunately, whenever I race, we sail upwind, it feels like you're going very fast because you have the wind coming on the same direction as the true wind, and the boat is going. So you're creating a lot of breeze on yourself, even if you're only going 12 knots. You're going 12 knots, there may be 12 to 15 knots of breeze coming at you, which feels like a lot more wind than it is. Now, when you're going downwind, you may be going downwind at 8 knots, and the breeze that you're creating feels like it's 8 knots of breeze, but the breeze behind you is closer to 10 or 12 knots. That really makes it feel like you're only in about 2 to 4 knots of breeze, which is very light. It can be stifling at times, especially on hot summer days. What I would like you to do now is, if you know the answer to the next few slides, please unmute yourself to answer. If not, I'm going to give about 5 seconds per. If you don't know, it's no problem. We're going to go over them more and more over the weekend. I just wanted to give everybody a chance to guess. So in these pictures, you can see the blue wind is the true wind, the green wind is the apparent wind, and the yellow line, the yellow arrow, is the boat wind. So in the first picture, Could you guys guess what position of sail you would be on? Anybody? Debbie was good at this last time. No. So that would be a close haul because of the breeze. Is that what you're going to say, Debbie?
Yes, but I could not unmute myself fast enough.
That's okay. Keep yourself unmuted. You might get the next one. So in picture 2, the wind is coming across the beam of the boat, and that makes the apparent wind coming from a little bit closer. That would put you on a
beam reach.
Yes, Debbie, you've got it. The last 2 are both in the picture that we showed before.
Broad reach and run.
Debbie, you're not making this fun for anybody else, you know, but I'm glad.
Awesome.
Broad reach and running. Well, as the adjectives would say, close haul, beam reaching, broad reaching, and running. I can go over this with anybody. If you have any questions at the end, please let me know. Okay, now steering the boat or driving the boat is what's done by the person who we discussed last week would be helming. The helmsman, the helmsperson at the helm is the one who is in charge of the rudder, and they'll also be in charge of the mainsail. We might split those duties up when we have extra people on the boat, but for all intents and purposes, those are usually done by the same person. The rudder, which angles the boat, decides which way the boat is facing, and the mainsail trim is how you angle the sail to either go, you either trim it or you let it out. And when you release the mainsail, you let it flap in the breeze, unless you're going downwind, in which case you'll be catching all the breeze. We're going to talk first about sailing upwind. So the rudder is moved using the wheel, or in this case, it would actually be the tiller, which is the wooden stick that comes off of the rudder. It's a direct drive system because you're directly touching the tiller, which directly touches the rudder. The rudder is effective only if it has water flowing past it. So when you have no current underneath you and you're not moving forward, your rudder is essentially useless. You can't do anything. You can't change direction if you don't keep speed up. So you can only steer when the boat is moving. The quicker you're sailing, the more effective it becomes due to the speed of the water crossing it. So if you're going slowly, you might have to push the rudder all the way out to make a turn. Whereas if you're going quickly, you can give it a little touch and the whole boat will start to turn very rapidly. The sail works best at a particular angle to the wind known as the angle of attack. So it must be trimmed or adjusted as you alter your course and checked regularly while sailing to ensure the setting is correct. If we're on a tack and we're trying to go upwind, when we start that tack, when we start that angle of attack, we're moving in one direction, sails are trimmed, and we are comfortably leaving the rudder facing directly behind us, kind of centered. What happens as you begin to move upwind is that you may experience shifts in breeze, you may experience being knocked off course by waves. All you have to do is realign the rudder as well as trim your jib and your mainsail in order to keep yourself moving forward in the most effective manner possible. How a boat performs upwind and how it should be sailed depends on the particular design characteristics. Boats such as International Dragons tend to have a long and narrow hull that keeps and deep keels. They are designed to sail to windward at quite a large angle of heel. More modern sailboats like the J22, the one that we'll be sailing this weekend, has a slightly different angle and the keel counteracts the wind differently. So if you can keep the boat flat, you'll actually have a very good shot at going upwind on 1 or 2 tacks, depending on how far off your marker is. I'm gonna move on to the next slide. Oh, just before we go on, adjust the sails to be full for choppy seas and or medium wind strength conditions and flatten them for flat water. So basically what we're gonna be doing is allowing for a lot of a lot of wind to catch our sails, but it's not all going to drive the sailboat forward while we're sailing this weekend, because we do know we're going to have a high wind scenario, which is absolutely incredible for sailing. The tighter you pull the backstay, which we're not really going to worry about for this class, will Bill, who is an incredible sailor, he's been sailing for many years, and he's great. He sailed the J22s in our last 2 regattas. He's in Jamaica on a sailboat. He'll be joining us this weekend, sailing the second boat that goes out. So we're looking forward to having him and having you guys learn from him. I'll make sure everybody gets a chance to be on both boats over the course of the weekend. This will flatten the mainsail and the jib. Yeah. A general rule of thumb is the windier it is, the more backstay you should put on, although this varies considerably depending on the particular boat. It will be true for us as well. Tacking is a sailing maneuver by which the vessel, sorry, I'm reading the wrong screen here. If you're trying to go upwind, the fastest way to do that is to tack back and forth towards the point that you would like to come. So if you're going from point A to point B, you have a lot of options for how you get there. Remember, P3 could also easily be on this side. You could go one way out and then one way back. Or you take P2 where you tack, 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 and you're up. And the last position, which if you get very good at tacking, gives you actually the closest angle. And it also makes it very easy to correct yourself if you're trying to sail upwind and the wind shifts. If you're staying as close to the path as you possibly can, you're more likely to be able to correct that error. If you're all the way out here and the wind shifts around and now is coming from this angle, now you have to tack back and forth to get to it anyways. So it really depends on your angle of attack. Tacking is used to change direction by taking the bow of the boat through the wind and requires good coordination between the helm, whoever's steering the boat, driving the boat, and the crew. Tacking is usually carried out on a move from one close haul to another to sail upwind if you're racing especially. But we'll practice tacking in different conditions. We'll be going from a broad reach to a beam reach to a what is the last one called? Close beam, close reach, and then close haul before we tack, because it keeps the sail as close to the center of the boat as possible, and it makes it very, very controlled when you change sides. The helm person to tack by checking the course is clear. When he's ready, the helm will yell "ready about," at which point, meaning ready to change about, to turn about, at which point the crew checks for the other boats and replies "ready." So if you're in a different position on the boat, you'll say "ready" as well. And the helm then change course, and so will the jib, so will the mainsail, and the helm's person will be back on the other side of the boat. We're going to watch a quick video. I hope you enjoy it. It's one of my favorites. I'm just going to pull it into the screen rather than bringing it over. Please let me know if you cannot hear it.
Can't hear anything.
All right, Debbie, thank you for that. Okay, so this video is great. I'll send it out to you guys in a little bit. It's specifically designed for racing a J22, which was very difficult to find just for cruising. But the man who is, he's actually helming the boat, but he's also narrating the video. He is talking about incredible sailing technique. And if we watch for a second, we'll see them change. So I don't like the quality of this actually. Here he goes. So he's standing up the whole time that he tacks. That's not entirely necessary. But as he says, it gives him a great feel for the boat, and it makes it very easy for him to get in the right position while sailing. The man at the front of the boat, the bowman, you can see he passes through what we call a door, which is created when the jib switches from one side of the boat to the other. It creates a space that the wind is going to pass through, but for the split second that it's transferring, the bowman can pass through it. The reason the jib changes sides is because the middleman, the person in the middle of the boat, is actually controlling both of the jib sheets, and he releases the one that needs to be released, which depending on what tack you're on, it will dictate, release the right side or the port side, release the starboard side or the port side, and then you can pull in the other side. Let's see here for a second, and then they all get their weight out again. So here you can see the middleman is getting ready to release the jib, which is actually lined up across. They have a crisscross over their cockpit. That's how they're doing this style of sailing. As you see, the bowman is going to get up and get into position. His position is in a very safe space here. It's between the jib sheet that runs from the starboard side through the port tackle and back over to the starboard side. It's a safe triangle where there's going to be no ropes moving and there's going to be no change in wind. As this door in front of him opens up, I don't know if you just saw him open the door, he basically is going to step through over to the other side. And the reason the door opened again is because the change in the wind, and this middleman here has just pulled in, trimmed the port side sheet of the boat, which ironically is actually crossed over to the starboard side because that's how they do it. They're talking about what everyone does in each position. If you'd like to watch this video before the weekend, be my guest. I'd be happy to have you guys knowing a lot more than me at this point, and definitely feel free to correct me if I say anything wrong as we go forward. I'm going to pause that and put it down now so it's no longer in our vicinity. Let's get the tacking going back up. So in picture at the bottom of the screen here, you can actually see you're on a starboard tack here because the wind's hitting the starboard side of the boat first. And as the rudder changes its angle, the boat begins to turn. The wind is coming from this direction over here. And as the rudder changes its angle, the boat begins to turn, which will allow, you can see here, the sail is in irons because you're going through the no-go zone. That's what you do every time you tack. You're going from one side of the wind to the other. So your boat crosses through that no-go zone that we discussed last week. And then on the other side of the boat, the wind is now hitting the port side. So they've gone from a starboard tack, change direction, and then the port tack. A jibe, which I explained earlier is spelled differently in two countries that both speak English, is a sailing maneuver whereby the sailing vessel reaching downwind turns its stern through the wind. So easy way to remember it, the bow passes the wind through through tack. The stern passes through the wind when you jibe. So the wind direction changes from one side of the boat to the other. On square rig ships, this maneuver is called wearing, and I'm sure that's because on square ships, square rig sails, you can basically only sail downwind, and the ship gets a lot of wear and tear every time the wind changes because everything has to move sides. It has to now catch it from the port side or catch it from the starboard side. In this maneuver, the mainsail will cross the center of the boat while the jib is pulled to the other side of the boat. So basically, in this image here, you're looking at our points of sail. So if you're trying to go from a close haul on your starboard tack to a close haul on your port tack, that is tacking. And then jibing would be going from anything from a broad reach and a run all the way over to the other side. I believe this is actually an image of a windsurfer because it looks like it. You have your little footholds here, but I thought it did very good to dictate. And the arrows could both be facing either way because you can jibe going to port or to starboard, and you can tack going from port to starboard and back. Here we can see the arrow for the wind in the top image. You're going along with the wind coming over your port side, as you change directions, the wind is coming directly over the stern of the boat. You flip the sail over, and now you're on a starboard tack. I will open the floor for any questions to this because it is kind of difficult to understand, but I think if you can get this, you're pretty good. Starting the maneuver in a broad reach or a training run, check the area that you're sailing into and ensure it's clear. So you don't want to be jibing when you're going over reef or you have anything in front of you. So we'll just, as a crew, look out for any obstacles that may need to be checked. So the helmsman, the person at the back, will say standing to jibe or helms to lee, meaning that he is now going to be on the lower side, the non-windward side of the boat, when they should release the jib sheet and call ready. So when we're going downwind, the helmsman will say standing by to jibe. When the crew is ready to jibe, they'll say ready. And I need everybody to say that on the boat so the helmsman can really know that it is time to jibe. The helmsman was going to change course by carrying out the jibe. Basically, if he's going downwind, he's going to push the tiller towards the sail, and that will allow the boat to change sides, go into the wind. The wind will cross the stern of the boat. He'll yell jibe ho and just remind everybody that he's jibing. As the mainsail swings across, we'll keep an eye out we'll duck a little bit, but on one of the sails that I'm bringing this weekend, I have it angled up very high. So even if you're standing up at the back, you're not likely to get hit. But that is one of the more dangerous parts of the activity in which we are undertaking. What we're going to do in the controlled jibe is actually take our full hand and grab the tackle of the main sheet. So the main sheet's going up and down in loops. We're going to grab that whole tackle and pull it towards the center of the boat while we change directions, swing it over to the other side, and then once it catches the wind on the other side, we can gently release it. But that's the controlled jibe, and that's the most effective use of the jibe. As the boom reaches the center line of the boat, you're going to basically center your tiller. You don't want your tiller still facing out because then you've got a crazy reaction. So move a little bit, pull the sail in, center the tiller, swing the sail over, and then you can continue on in whichever direction you so desire. This is usually the most challenging maneuver in keelboat sailing. Safety is a primary consideration here. It is vital that all the crew keep their heads down as the boom swings across during a jibe. You can minimize the risk of boom crashing across the sheet as the boom almost to the center line and you prepare to jibe. As the boat jibes and the wind fills the sail on the new side, let the main sheet out and rapidly get positioned on the other side of the boat. We're not going to talk about spinnakers, but that's the third sail on these boats, and that's when the real difficulty comes in jibing. And you don't have to worry about that. Man overboard. Does anybody want to take a guess as to what man overboard is? Debbie?
Somebody falling overboard when it keels out, when the boat goes high on one side, somebody falls off. No
problem at all. Sorry, yes, that is correct, Debbie. It is basically the action by which someone falls off the boat, or something falls off the boat. You can call man overboard, which is what we're going to be doing. I've requested some of my big buckets, so I'll just cover them so that way they float very easily. But we're going to go through and talk about man overboard procedures right now. Prevention is the best method to safeguard against man overboard. This basically just means that not doing a man overboard is the best way to keep from doing a man overboard. As a skipper, it is your duty to take all the necessary steps in order to minimize the risk of an MOB, as we call it, situation from arising. As a crew member, it is your responsibility to inform yourself of the risks and not put yourself at unnecessary risk. So taking all the precautions necessary to stay safe. The first one is one hand to yourself. So the old rule of one hand to yourself and one hand for the boat, meaning if you're using a hand to pull in a rope, you have one hand on the rope and maybe you have another hand on the boat, or you have access to having one hand on the boat. So if for whatever reason we get a funny wave from the side, the wind's taken it to a gust, at least you're able to hold on and you won't be thrown into the water. Always make sure that you're hanging onto something secure in case you're suddenly knocked off balance, especially if you are on the foredeck, meaning at the front of the boat. Keep a lookout. Always be aware of what the boat is doing. Keep your eyes on the water for irregular or rogue waves. We don't really get those in Montego Bay. We haven't seen any, but we do have some big waves that come across. So if you're facing backwards and we go over one wave and then maybe you're tacking or doing something a little bit different for the second wave, that change in momentum can really throw you off balance. So you have to be aware of that and make sure you're holding on to something at all times and trying to keep an eye out for these sorts of things. If the helm shout wave, if you're at the helm, shout wave if a large wave is approaching so the crew can brace themselves and hold firm. Know your limitations. If you have poor balance or an impairment that could put yourself at greater risk, swallow your pride, let someone else more suited for the task take over. This doesn't mean you can't sail. We'd love you to sail. We might put you in a position where you're not at risk of falling off the boat very often, but we'll work on that. Wear the right gear by having the gloves on your hand. If your hand is rope burnt from letting a rope slide through your bare fingers, it's going to be a lot harder for you to hold on to things. So we're going to make sure that we have the right gear while we're sailing, and then the right equipment. If you have any, we have our life jackets and we have our, that's basically all we'll need. But having glasses on, things that help us see in the water. If you're getting splashed in the face, we don't have to close our eyes if we have our glasses on, for example. We're going to go through the 2 man overboard procedures that are, most well known here. And they are the quick stop and the figure 8 method. So really in Jamaica, if you get knocked overboard, as long as you're conscious and you can swim and you're wearing your life jacket, we love the water. We could be in the water all day. It doesn't matter to us. But in ideal situations, you want to get the person who fell in the water back on the boat as quickly and safely as possible. So the first most important part of that is to make sure that you keep contact of the person or thing that has fallen overboard. Once you shout man overboard, we'll designate a spotter, and that person will probably be the same person who yelled man overboard because they can already see the person who fell overboard. And they're going to not take their eyes off of them until they're back on the boat. If you have a buoy or a marker, we'll throw that overboard because they're oftentimes very brightly colored and they can help us find the man overboard. We won't be doing that on the J22. We'll just be getting them back on the boat as quickly as possible. The skipper will appoint the spotter. So if you yell man overboard, chances are, if I'm the skipper, I'm saying, keep an eye out, keep an eye on them. Don't worry, we will get you, stay calm. We're just turning around to come back. If we're sailing in the picture down below here, if we're close hauled up to the wind, we're moving pretty quickly. If you fall overboard, we could be, 40 feet away from you in 10 seconds. Don't worry, we're coming back for you. And just assure them that you'll come back. Basically, the fastest way to do this with your figure of 8 or beat and beat method is, beam and beam, reach and reach, reach and reach. Figure 8 or reach and reach is we're going to tack up into the breeze, come back down below the person who is in the water, and then let out the sail as we come up towards them, and we'll glide for another 10, 15 feet, probably, depending on the speed that we're going. And we want to glide. We want to keep them on the lee side of the boat. There are different theories about which side of the boat is best, but I prefer the lee side because the wind is basically being blocked from the person by the boat, and you have a lot better chance of pulling them on. The J22s sit about 1.5 feet, 2 feet out of the water when they're not being keeled over. So we can also get one person on that side and bring the side of the boat right the way down, and it's very easy to pull them up onto the boat. The other way to stop very quickly is basically if we yell man overboard and we're close hauled going to the left, we're on a starboard tack, we tack over to the port side, but instead of releasing the jib sheet, we let it stay. And what this will basically do is catch all the wind on the wrong side of the sail. This is what I kind of tried to draw for us last week. I wish I had this image then. This is what Julia had asked about. The wind is going to fill the incorrect side of the sail, creating no drift, creating no drive, no lift, and it's going to effectively stop the boat in its tracks. If the person is 2 or 3 feet behind us, we'll toss a rope to them, or if they can swim to the boat, they'll swim over to the boat, and we'll then let go of the jib sheet on this side because it will still be pushing us down, and just allow them both to be in irons like we can see at the bottom of this picture here. Don't worry, guys, we'll walk through this with our big buckets and you guys will feel very prepared to do a man overboard procedure when your turn comes. The quick stop method, that's the one I just described, excuse me. Anchoring, mooring. So anchoring the boat is effectively putting a device onto the sea floor that is going to keep the boat in place. So the different types of anchors are listed here. The most common that we'll use on J22s are called Danforth. They're very, very simple anchors and they're easy to release if you're moving the boat. Deltas are traditionally used for much bigger boats, bigger vessels that will, when the waves are pulling the boat, will dig deeper into the sand or stone, whatever it is that you're anchoring in. In the last picture down below here, you can see in one, they drop the anchor over. The wind usually is what's blowing you backwards. So you're trying to go to where you want the anchor dropped into the wind, drop the anchor, and then let the wind push you backwards. You have no sails up at this point. You're waiting for the anchor to catch. If you have chain on the bottom of your anchor, like they do in this one, you need 5 to 1. So if you're in 20 feet of water, you need 100 feet of rope and chain from your anchor to your bow. That's the traditional method. In this picture, you can actually see he's docking. So he's anchored out and then he's coming back into a dock. We'll do it more like this style if we ever anchor or moor. And a mooring is basically just that's not a mooring here. This is a mushroom anchor, but a mooring is basically a device that's going to be used to keep you in the same place. You can see mooring balls in front of Doctor's Cave. You see them out in the harbor. They're designed to create tension between if you have the mooring on the top of the water and you're being pushed backwards, rather than your boat pulling directly on whatever it is you're anchored to, you're pulling on the mooring, which will create a buoyancy effect and almost spring you back into place. So you need to make sure you have enough length, at least the length of your boat between your mooring and your bow, wherever you're tied up onto the mooring. Any questions about this sheet? The last thing we're going to discuss is actually docking. So I've written it out here. I'm going to try to draw it up on the board. If you guys can see this board behind me, I'm not sure. I'll stop screen sharing in a second. I just want you to see it before I do. So the first thing you're going to do is prepare the bow lines. That just means making sure that the bow lines are ready to be given to the person on the dock, or they're ready to be stepped onto the dock with. They're tied onto, we have cleats on the bow and 2 on the stern of the J22s will be sailing. So just making sure there's a dock line either tied on or cleated on. Prepare for approach and see if there are any obstacles. Sometimes I'll be coming into the dock and before I've dropped any of the sails, I'll come in very quickly and I'll just give a quick look around the area, make sure there's no other boats moving around there, no fishing lines, no anchor lines, anything just hanging over the area that I'm going into. Come back out, tack one time, tack a second time, and then drop the jib, drop the mainsail, cast your line to the dock hand, or carefully step off the boat and secure both your bow and your stern lines. If you're coming into a slip, you want to make sure you have a nice loop on the back of your stern line. Usually I make this with a figure of eight, with a bowline, and I will put that over one of the pylons out a little bit further. So as we're coming into the dock, I have a secured line at the back already. We come straight into the dock, we have the sails down, and I can also control the speed of the boat with that stern line. Let me try to draw this for you very quickly. Anybody have any questions about this so far? Yeah. So on the board behind me, we're going to pretend the wind is coming from, you can see it right here. Oh, I'm sorry. The lights are hideous. So when we sail in Montego Bay, the wind comes from off of the dock side. So the dock is lined up like this. Then we have on the bay side, this is where the crane would be. And we've got all these pylons out here, boats. So we come in basically this direction, and we're coming down this way. We have our boat here. It's much bigger than our boats would actually. I'm gonna try to draw it a little bit better and more to size. But we've got our boat here. Jib, main, sorry, they're supposed to be catching a little bit more grease. Basically, you drop your jib, so your jib is no longer there. You secure your line, so you have your line secured on the front, and you know you're coming in this direction, so you've secured your line to the port on the stern side. Hope everybody can hear me okay. And then as you come in, you're going to pull your tiller, you're going to push away from you, which will push the rudder towards you and turn the boat up into the breeze. And as you're doing this, you've either already dropped your mainsail, so the mainsail goes bye-bye, or you are dropping your mainsail at the same time or letting it out all the way. If you sheet out your mainsail all the way and basically put your main and your jib in irons, you'll lose all of your speed, which is exactly what you want to do when you're coming into a giant concrete dock. But you're going to try to line up very smoothly, so that way you've got your dock line secured to the stern and your bow line secured to the docks. Does anybody have any questions now? I'm going to stop the recording because we're at 53 minutes, and hopefully I can just get this one uploaded immediately. But please let me know if you have any questions.